The house had never felt so empty since my mom passed away. Even with friends around, there was this quiet that clung to the walls, something that no amount of laughter could shake. We were gathered in my room for a sleepover, the first one since everything happened. My friends, always trying to cheer me up, brought snacks, movies, and even a Ouija board. At first, I wanted nothing to do with it. I had heard stories about those things, and after everything I'd been through, I wasn't keen on opening any doors that couldn't be closed. But as the night wore on, and the idle chatter of teenage girls turned into whispers about the supernatural, I found myself oddly drawn to it. Maybe it was the grief, or maybe it was just curiosity, but something inside me told me I needed to try. The lights in my room were dim, candles flickering as my friends giggled nervously. We set the Ouija board down in the center of the room, forming a circle around it. My hands trembled slightly as I placed my fingers on the planchette along with the others. It felt like my heart was pounding louder than anyone else's, but I tried to steady my breathing. We asked the usual questions. Is anyone here? And can you give us a sign? For a while, nothing happened, just silence. But then, the planchette started to move. At first, I thought one of the girls was messing with me. My friend raised her eyebrows, half excited, half scared as the pointer shifted slowly across the board. We asked, "Who are you?" And the planchette spelled out a name. I froze. My friends looked at me, their laughter dying on their lips. They knew what that name meant to me. I tried to laugh it off, accusing them of playing some kind of sick joke, but they swore it wasn't them. I could feel my skin prickle, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. Against my better judgment, I asked, "Is it really you, Mom?" The planchette moved again, this time spelling out. I wanted to pull my hands away, to stop this right then and there, but something kept me going, like I needed to hear what this spirit had to say. My friends were silent, watching with wide eyes as the messages continued. "What do you want to tell me?" I whispered. The planchette moved faster this time, like whoever, whatever, was on the other side was desperate to communicate. The letters came together slowly, and as I read them aloud, a chill ran down my spine. "You are in danger." I couldn't breathe. My friends stared at me, eyes wide with concern, but none of us could look away from the board. I forced myself to ask another question, even though I was terrified of the answer. "Danger? From where?" The planchette hesitated for a moment before moving again, slowly spelling out words that would change everything. It wasn't an accident. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mom had died in what the authorities called a tragic accident, something involving a freak fall down the stairs while she was home alone. But now, this message was implying that there was something more, that maybe it wasn't an accident at all. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked, "What do you mean?" The room was deathly quiet as the letters formed once again. Someone pushed me. My heart raced, pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. I looked around at my friends. None of them were laughing anymore. They looked as horrified as I felt. "Who?" I barely managed to ask. The answer came in a single words. I didn't know who him was, but suddenly I felt a wave of nausea. Something was wrong, very wrong. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, the words barely a whisper. "To protect you," the Ouija board responded. "He's coming for you next." Terror gripped me, and I jerked my hands away from the board. My friends were pale, staring at me in disbelief. I wanted to run, to leave the room, but I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor, the weight of my mother's message hanging in the air like a storm cloud. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Who's coming for me?" The planchette didn't move. It just stayed still, as though whatever was on the other side had said all it needed to. My friends were wide-eyed, whispering amongst themselves, but I couldn't focus on their voices. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what was happening. Was this real? Could this really be my mom warning me from beyond the grave? Or was it just some sick bird? But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was real. The heaviness in the room, the cold air, the way my heart hammered in my chest. It felt too real to be fake. That night, after my friends had left, I lay in bed wide awake. The house felt different, like a dark cloud hung over it, heavy and oppressive. I couldn't stop thinking about the message, about my mom's warning. It wasn't an accident. Someone pushed me. He's coming for you next. I tried to rationalize it, tried to convince myself. It was all just a game gone too far. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for the right moment to. The shadows seemed to move, and every little creak in the house made me jump. I could barely breathe as I waited for something, anything, to happen. Hours passed, and eventually, I drifted into a restless sleep. I woke up to a sound, a soft creak coming from the hallway. My heart pounded as I slowly turned over, eyes wide, straining to see through the darkness. There, just beyond the doorway, I saw a figure, a shadow, tall and looming. And then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. "Time's up," I screamed, jumping out of bed and rushing to the door. But when I got there, the hallway was empty. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, the Ouija board. The planchette was moving on its own, spelling out one final message: run. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and bolted out of the house, leaving everything behind. I ran until my legs burned and my chest ached. When I finally stopped, I collapsed on a neighbor's porch, gasping for breath. Whatever was coming for me, it didn't get me that night. But I knew deep down that my mother's warning had saved my life. It had been years since I'd thought about him, my childhood friend, the one who disappeared without a trace when we were just kids. His face had faded from memory, replaced by the realities of adult life. But one night, without warning, he returned. In a dream so vivid it felt real. We were back in our old neighborhood, the same park we used to play in. The swings creaked in the wind, and everything was bathed in a pale, eerie light. He was there, standing at the edge of the playground, watching. But something was wrong. His face. There was something off about it, like it was blurred, distorted, just. I tried to speak to him, but no sound came out. I felt paralyzed, rooted to the spot. He raised his hand, pointing toward the woods behind the park. And then I woke up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. At first, I chalked it up to stress or some random memory surfacing after all these years. But the dreams didn't stop. Night after night, I'd find myself in the same place, with him staring at me, beckoning me toward the woods. And every time, I'd wake up right before I could follow. The dreams started to bleed into my waking life. It wasn't just that they were happening more frequently. It was that they were becoming more real. I could feel the cool breeze from the park, smell the damp earth beneath my feet, and then the phone calls started. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. My phone would ring, displaying a number I didn't recognize, but every time I answered, there was nothing on the other end, just silence. It happened once, then twice, then almost every day. I tried blocking the number, but the calls kept coming, always from different lines. And each time, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to the dreams. One night, after yet another vivid nightmare, I picked up the phone without thinking. This time, there was something different. It wasn't just silence. I could hear faint breathing on the other end, soft and deliberate. My stomach twisted in knots, but I couldn't bring myself to hang up. Instead, I whispered, "Hello?" But just as I was about to end the call, I heard it. Faint, almost a whisper, a voice I hadn't heard in years. "It's me." I jolted awake, gasping for air. The phone was still clutched in my hand, the screen dark. My heart was racing and my mind was spinning. It couldn't be him. It just couldn't. But the voice, it was unmistakable. In the days that followed, the dreams grew darker, more intense. He wasn't just watching me anymore, he was leading me deeper into the woods. Each night, I'd get a little closer, but always, something would stop me. A branch would snap under my foot, or the wind would howl, and I'd wake up before I could reach him. I became obsessed. I couldn't focus at work, and I started avoiding my friends and family. I spent hours online searching for any clues about my friend's disappearance, but there was nothing new. Just the same cold case that had haunted our town. And then, one night, the dream changed. I followed him through the woods, like always, but this time I didn't wake up. I kept walking, my feet sinking into the damp earth as the trees closed in around me. He was just ahead, his figure barely visible in the shadows. I called out to him, but he didn't turn around. Instead, he kept moving, leading me deeper into the forest until we reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a small, overgrown structure, a shack half buried in the ground. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized I had seen this place before, but not in the waking world. It was part of my dream, a place that shouldn't exist. I woke up with a start, my heart racing. But this time something was different. I knew where it was, the clearing, the shack. It wasn't just part of the dream, it was a real place. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to find it. I wasn't sure why, but something was pulling me toward that place. Like a magnet, I drove to the old park, the one from my childhood, and wandered into the woods. It felt strange being back here after so many years, like stepping into a memory that had been locked away for too long. I walked for what felt like hours, following a path I had never seen before, but somehow knew by heart. And then, just like in the dream, the trees parted, revealing the clearing. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the shack, half hidden by the brush, exactly as it had been in my nightmares. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I couldn't. I had to know what was inside. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the smell of damp wood and decay filling my lungs. The interior was dark, but a sliver of light from the doorway illuminated something on the floor. As my eyes adjusted, I saw it, a pile of old clothes, tattered and faded, and something else. Something that made my blood run cold. It was a bracelet, a simple, cheap bracelet, the kind you might find in a kid's toy store. But I recognized it immediately. It had belonged to him, my friend, the one who disappeared all those years ago. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. How could this be here? How could I have known about this place, this thing, when I had never been here before? I heard the phone ring again, the same unknown number. I didn't want to answer, but my hands moved on their own, lifting the phone to my ear. The breathing was there, soft and steady, followed by the same voice. "Help me." The words were barely a whisper, but they sent a jolt of terror through me. I looked down at the bracelet in my hand, realizing the horrifying truth. My friend had never just vanished. He had been here all this time, waiting for someone to find him. I dropped the phone and ran, my heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled through the woods, the trees closing in around me. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the park, gasping for breath, my mind reeling. I never went back to that place. I couldn't. But the nightmares didn't stop. Every night I see him, standing in that clearing, waiting for me to return. And every time the phone rings, I know it's him, calling out for help from a place I can't reach. I tried telling myself it was all a dream, some twisted manifestation of guilt or grief. But deep down, I knew the truth. He's still out there, trapped in that place, and no matter how far I run, I can never escape the haunting reminder of what happened. The bracelet sits in a drawer in my room, a silent testament to the nightmare I can never forget. Somehow, I know the calls won't stop. Not until I face the truth of what really happened to him. Returning to my hometown for the first time in years felt like stepping into a forgotten dream. The narrow streets, lined with familiar houses, seemed smaller now, as if they had shrunk with time. I had moved away for college and never looked back. But the wedding of an old friend had pulled me back here, back to the place where everything had started. Driving past the edge of town, my gaze drifted toward the woods in the distance. Even after all these years, they still loomed over the town like a dark, impenetrable wall. The same woods where I had lost something irreplaceable, or rather someone. The memories of those days had faded into a vague blur, but I could still feel the heavy ache in my chest when I thought about her. My childhood friend who had disappeared without a trace when we were just 10 years old. I hadn't thought about her in years. The town had moved on, and so had I. But now, back in the same streets where we used to play, the memories came flooding back. And with them, the unsettling feeling that something about her disappearance had never quite... The first night back was uneventful until the dream came. It was so vivid, so real, I could almost feel the ground beneath my feet. I was back in the woods, running, the trees whipping past me, and there she was, just ahead of me. Her blonde hair bouncing as she laughed and darted deeper into the forest. But then, something changed. The air grew thick and heavy, and the laughter stopped. I watched her stop abruptly, turning toward me with wide, terrified eyes. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Before I could reach her, she vanished, swallowed by the shadows between the trees. I jolted awake, my heart racing, drenched in sweat. The room was dark, the only sound the faint hum of traffic outside. But the dream clung to me, refusing to fade. Over the next few days, the visions started to bleed into my waking life. I would be sitting in a cafe, catching up with old friends, when suddenly I'd see her, just out of the corner of my eye, slipping through the trees. Every time I blinked, she was gone, but the feeling of dread remained. I knew I was being drawn back to the woods, the place where we had played as kids, where she had disappeared. Something was calling me, pulling me toward the truth I had tried to forget for so long. I couldn't ignore it anymore. One afternoon, I found myself standing at the edge of the forest, staring into the dark, twisting paths that led deeper into the trees. I hadn't been back here since she vanished. The police had searched the woods for weeks, but they never found anything. No body, no clues, nothing. Eventually, everyone accepted that she was gone, swallowed by the... But I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was still out there, hidden in the shadows. I started walking, my footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves, the air thick with the smell of damp earth. The deeper I went, the heavier the air seemed to become. The silence was oppressive, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, like the rustling of leaves, but it carried a familiar tone. A voice I hadn't heard in years. Her voice, "Help me." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was faint, almost swallowed by the wind, but I knew it was her. I followed the sound, deeper into the trees, until I reached a clearing. In the center of the clearing was an old, crumbling stone well, something I had never seen before, though I had played in these woods countless times as a child. The whispers grew louder as I approached the well, my feet moving on their own, as if guided by something unseen. I peered over the edge, into the darkness below. The air around me felt heavy, thick with a presence I couldn't explain, and then, for the first time, I saw it, flashes of the past, of that day so long ago. In the vision, we were playing near the well, laughing and chasing each other. But something had drawn her attention. She stood at the edge of the well, staring into the abyss below. I called her name, but she didn't respond. She leaned closer, as if something was calling her from within. And then, just as quickly as it started, the vision ended. I gasped, stumbling backward from the well. My mind was racing. How could I have forgotten? The well had been here all along, hidden in the deepest part of the woods. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened here, something I had blocked from my memory. Driven by a strange compulsion, I grabbed a nearby branch and started digging around the base of the well. The ground was soft, the earth giving way easily. After what felt like hours, my hand struck something hard. I reached down and pulled out a small, rusted locket, the same locket my friend had been wearing the day she disappeared. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened it. Inside was a picture of the two of us, taken just weeks before she vanished. But something else was there too. Something written on a small piece of paper, faded with age. The words were barely legible, but I could make them out. Beware the well. Suddenly, it all made sense. She hadn't disappeared into the woods. She had been taken by something that lived in the well. I stumbled back, clutching the locket in my hand. The weight of the truth was crushing. She hadn't just vanished. Something had taken her, something ancient and malevolent. And I had been there. I had seen it, but my mind had buried the memory deep, too terrified to face the truth. I knew what I had to do. The next day, I returned to the woods, armed with nothing but my resolve. I approached the well, my heart racing, the whispers growing louder as I neared. I could feel her presence, could almost see her standing there, watching me. I threw the locket into the well, the sound echoing in the darkness below. For a moment, everything was silent, and then a gust of wind swept through the clearing, the trees groaning as if they were alive. And then it stopped. The whispers, the visions, everything was gone. I stood there staring into the well, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. It was over. The past, the secrets, the nightmares, they had all been laid to rest. I left the woods that day, feeling lighter than I had in years. The haunting memories of my childhood friend had finally been put to rest. I still don't know what lurked in those woods, what had taken her all those years ago, but I knew one thing for certain. I had faced the darkness and I had survived. As I drove out of town, leaving the forest behind me, I realized that some things are better left buried. But sometimes, the past has a way of coming back. And when it does, you have to be ready to face the truth, no matter how terrifying it may be. If you want to see more horror stories, please like the video, share your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Stay with us, thank you, and see you in the next videos.